Hello there, kia ora. Welcome to this week's Omnibus edition. It is a bit of a short one. I only did 3 videos, I think, throughout the week, because Friday has spent most of the day just organizing everything for the news and the live streams and getting all the technical elements ready for that. But it's a big one. It's a really big one. And then, son moved house. He's here for a few weeks before he moves down to Dunedin. And of course, working on the documentary that I'm working on at the moment. And that's just... It's really hard sometimes to feel like you're staying objective with something like that. So I've been really trying to make sure that's what I do. And I've been sending it off to people at different cuts going, so what do you think? And the feedback so far has been actually pretty positive and some really constructive stuff in there. So working on it. Just get in there very, very carefully. And I've got interviews lined up this week with a couple of local elected officials. I'm not going to name names, but they're coming on board to give me a bit of context around their experience dealing with local astroturfing groups. So I think it'll be a really interesting one for people to sit down and actually sort of dive into it. And someone also sent me a message going, you do realize you're going to get a whole bunch of death threats and a whole bunch of arseholes come after you because these people are not particularly nice. And as you can see from this, this was a nice piece of passive racism from Andrew Bitter that came through yesterday when I pointed out that, maybe he's not the right person to be giving information considering he's so far down the rabbit hole of disinformation. But his fans lap it up, and it was on one of their local AstroTurf groups, so no surprise there. And casual racism seems to go hand in hand with this lot. It's just what it is. So anyway, 3 videos this week. One was looking at local media and why we need to have really good, solid local media that are holding candidates and councillors to account. One was a reminder that the RSB submission process is coming to an end soon. So definitely, if you haven't had a chance yet, please get in there and make sure that you've done your submission. And then this week's the news. It's also a newsletter this week on Substack. If you don't follow me on Substack already, go and give that a subscribe. It's linked in the description on the link tree. You can get things sent to you directly. It's how Substack works. All right, let's cut the rambling, jump over there now so you can watch the videos, and I will catch you at the other end, the other bookend. Hello there, kia ora. In elections, local media has a really important role, and in local body elections, that role is crucial. In 2022, at the last local body elections, over 3,000 people ran for elected positions, and it's impossible for nationwide mainstream media to cover all of them, to give nuance to issues, to consider the impact of their policies on the council, communities, and the places that we all call home. That's why local media is so important to democracy. They often have access to information that nationwide mainstream media doesn't, especially in small communities. They act as watchdogs on local issues, fact-checking claims, reporting on voting records, and can hold candidates accountable over issues important to their specific communities, which helps increase engagement with the election processes. They're also a bit of a wall between the general public and disinformation and astroturfing groups. Alt-right and disinformation candidates often benefit from what we call shadow networks, Facebook groups, Telegram channels, and fake community organisations, like Better Hamilton. Better Hamilton is a recent addition to the world set up by Ray Mudford. And this week, Hamilton City Councillor Andrew Bitter announced he was running a loose alliance of candidates for this year's elections under the name tied into their website, after last week announcing the same strategy for the Waipa with a group called Better Waipa. And they're both modelled on the controversial Better Wellington model. Not only did Bitter admit that himself in the article, he actually said the same thing to Liz Gunn from New Zealand Loyal last year when they made a series of videos about how the alt-right can overtake councils.
I've been making connections with a number of other councillors in other regions, including Wellington, and Councillor Ray Chung there.
Yeah, this is a candidate who was this week endorsed by the alt-right Twitter troll who set up the anti-trans inflection point event in Wellington and whose unfounded rumours resulted in death threats aimed at Green MP Benjamin Doyle. So clearly a great affiliation that Hamiltonians might want to be aware of. And therein is the crux of the problem with this coverage. Nowhere does it mention in this story announcing the Better Hamilton Alliance links with disinformation beliefs. Bitter's most well-known controversial moment was when he called Waipa Mayor Susan O'Regan slurs used to disparage disabled people because of 15-minute city conspiracies. That was his actual defence that he gave in the meeting where council censured him. His co-candidates he's announced so far, Well, in Waipa, they include a horse-loving, anti-trans, turf vaccine-hesitant illegal parliamentary siege refugee and a man once blocked from the Ministry of Health for spamming them with anti-vaccine and anti-fluoride crap. In the Better Hamilton website, well, Mudford actually ran with Bidder in 2022. At the time, he was known simply for being a Voices for Freedom stan and incredibly anti-vaccine. He was the least controversial of all the candidates in that ticket, which included Rudy Deploy, a man who once tried to revive the apartheid-era Day of the Vow ceremony in Hamilton, a celebration of a massacre of Zulus in the 1830s, and last election made headlines for using MS Paint to say someone had attacked his election signs. Oh, and Rousseau Knapp, who was the New Zealand First candidate for the last general election, who thinks Māori seats at council are racist and undemocratic. And the Better Hamilton site is still sharing content from these people as though it's not pushing alt-right ideologies. And none of this is in that article in this week's Waikato Times. And when it comes to local media, a lack of information creates a vacuum. It means a lack of real scrutiny on candidates, which means these kind of beliefs get masked, and in some cases can mean voters are unaware of their real affiliations until after they're elected. That void can be filled with partisan voices, like mine, saying Hamiltonians and the people of Waipa should not vote for any people on any one of these tickets. But it can also drive algorithms for casual voters into the content of candidates who they may not agree with, but they don't know that because of the lack of coverage. A lack of local coverage also erodes democracy. It undermines trust in elections and allows narratives in the public space to be controlled by those groups and shadow networks. You think it's an accident the same content keeps popping up in your feeds around these topics? And if local media isn't there picking up on these issues and making the public aware of them, then that void gets filled by Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and talkback radio, which can amplify polarizing and misleading narratives without fact checks, alternative perspectives, and data to keep people informed. And what we see happening in Kirikiriroa Hamilton is just a microcosmos of what's happening all over the country. There are groups and candidates who will want to downplay their links to the alt-right and conspiracy beliefs, and a lack of local coverage to push back on it. Which is why it is so important that this year your vote in your local elections is made and you do your own research into candidates to see if their ideologies align with yours. Because if you don't, you might end up with someone who genuinely believes the role of councillors is to refuse to listen to experts, refuse to work for communities, to, now what was that?
And the easiest way is to become ungovernable. Don't do what they're asked to do.
There, kia ora. Look, this is going to be a really short video for a couple of reasons. Like, it's midnight while I'm making it, and I haven't had power for most of the day because they're building something down the street and they needed to turn the power off to connect to the site. So I just haven't had long to do everything that I needed to get done. But I don't need long to tell you that there are only 10 days left now for submissions on the Regulatory Standards Bill. And it's really important that people get out there and have their say. There's a whole bunch of misgivings that I've heard behind the scenes between New Zealand First and the rest of the coalition around this bill. They're not fans. And pushing the fact that this is a horrible bill with a whole bunch of flaws is, well, it's a step that we can take, and maybe getting New Zealand First to push back on it after all, which would be, not a bad thing to have happen. So get your submissions in. They don't have to be long, but they can be if you want. You can put as much detail in there as you need to, and there's a whole bunch of amazing people out there who've got resources and reasons as to why this is a really bad bill. Or you could do your own research and look up things like the Law Society feedback on it, which called it vague, overly Americanized, and not really fit for purpose, with absolutely no reference whatsoever to our founding document, which is the cornerstone of all democracy in the country. So, yeah, maybe we should have a reference to that in this bill, but it's not there by design, and we all know that. So get in there and have your say. Like I said, make it unique, otherwise David Seymour will think you're a bot. And it's easy to make a joke about how David Seymour seems like a robot, but they have paradox issues, and let's face facts, the Libertarian Free Speech Party, who tells everybody to shut up if he doesn't believe them and calls them bots, that's a paradox that would blow a bot's brain. So he's clearly not one. He's just a terrible, terrible person. So yeah, 10 days from today to get your submissions in on the Regulatory Standards Bill. Head to parliament.nz, super easy to find, just do a search for it. It'll probably come up with the past bills, the 3 times that this has been before Parliament before, where it's failed every time, because it's still a highly flawed, very dangerous Terrible, terrible law. But get in, have your say, maybe shake things up a little bit, see whether or not New Zealand First actually listen to the people, because they're going to want the headlines, because there's an election coming up and they keep drifting down in the polls. So yeah, 10 days, get it done. Do it this weekend, do it today, just get it out of the way. In this week's episode, the Workplace Relations Minister is okay if you take a fall. A shake-up where they monitor earthquakes. Nothing to see here, says Finance Minister, and the most popular future destination of the country revealed. All that and more in this week's The News. Hello there, kia ora, I'm Paul, and next week this will have been last week's This Week's The News. It was revealed this week that the reasons behind Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr's sudden resignation back in March, seen here discovering he has a meeting at the Beehive he didn't realise was in his calendar, were down to conflicts with the Finance Minister over funding for the bank. At the time, Board Chair Neil Quigley had said it was for personal reasons, which Orr has backed up, saying, "I find doing everything in their power to tank the economy pretty damned personal." A ministerial advisory group has warned that corruption and insider trading threats are increasing in New Zealand, adding that the country was poorly prepared for it. The report defined corruption as the abuse of access or authority to advance objectives of organised crime. Said Police Minister Casey Costello, seen here daydreaming about her work with Hobson's Pledge and how much satisfaction she got from treading down on Māori. "We know there's an international trend of this increasing, and we feel the best way to tackle it is to only allow people to access MPs if they're part of a secretive group of lobbyists, like the tobacco industry or international mining companies. That way it's not illegal corruption, just the good old-fashioned legal kind." Official figures from the Ministry of Justice released this week show a projected increase of 35% for the country's prison population by 2035. Driven by the return of the 3 strikes law, sentencing caps and more aggravating factors in sentencing, the projections would see an increased population in prisons of around 12,000 people, said Corrections Minister Mark Mitchell, seen here trying to do a sexy lip-biting scene in the world's worst rom-com. "I believe we will have the capacity to handle this, because being tough on criminals always works when you ignore the drivers of crime." A new report from Oranga Tamariki has shown that Māori children are overrepresented in being let down, with Māori adults who have been through the system having higher mortality rates than those who aren't Māori. Those who have been in care were also 9 times more likely to need emergency housing support and half as likely to be able to find long-term employment, said Children's Minister Karen Chow, seen here trying to live, laugh and let kids be hit in boot camps. "It's a sobering report. We all want the best outcomes for these kids, and while we may have removed that specific legislation that allowed that to happen, that was delivering the results that we now say that we want, I guess the cause behind this will forever be a mystery." GNZ Science is asking for voluntary redundancies from its 24/7 geohazard monitoring team in a drive to pay for landlord tax cuts, which may result in the centre, which provides around-the-clock detection services of tsunamis, earthquakes, landslides and eruptions, no longer being staffed at all times, said Civil Defence Minister Mark Mitchell, seen here trying to show you what a tornado sounds like. "We're sure the geological fault lines that the country is built on will understand that they can only move during office hours, and everyone knows that tsunamis don't hit at night." A youth hikoi is to be held in Auckland this weekend to raise awareness of the number of young people currently experiencing homelessness, some as young as 11 years old, according to advocates. The latest data shows Auckland has seen a 53% increase in people sleeping rough between September and January, and reports have emerged that people fleeing domestic violence are being turned away from emergency housing at WINZ for contributing to their situation. Said the Prime Minister, seen here in an earthquake that remembered to hit during office hours, "Look, what I'm saying to you is, there is no evidence that I've wanted to see or allowed in my office that shows our policies and punitive approach to welfare has anything to do with why 11-year-olds are sleeping rough. Why don't you focus on those Kiwis who actually work hard to become billionaires instead? They're good people who deserve our admiration a lot more than some homeless kids." The ACT Party is set to announce its list of candidates for the upcoming local body elections shortly, saying that the process of selection is now complete. David Seymour, seen here with his former advisor on how to select people, has said that they will stand on a range of policies which include fucking over the environment, fucking over Māori, and sucking any joy from communities. "We really wanted these candidates to embody everything about the ACT Party," Seymour said, "and I'm sure voters will understand that when they see ACT on their voting forms, that they will have a choice." An AI video of Nelson District Councillor Campbell Rollo, seen here standing between Nelson's tallest buildings, has sparked warnings about the use of AI and spread of disinformation in this year's local body elections. The video used Rollo's likeness and had him using an automatic weapon and was watermarked with an AI video producer logo. Said experts on the topic, "We can expect to find more of this kind of disinformation as these groups discover the height of 2022 technology on their phones, and since some of them can't read but believe what they're told is on Facebook, they could have a major impact on how campaigns are run this election. Our advice? Ignore what you see on Facebook and get out and meet the candidates directly." ACC has warned Workplace Relations Minister Brooke Van Velden, seen here waiting to see what happens when you remove the wet floor sign, that her proposed changes to health and safety laws will result in higher payouts and an increase in musculoskeletal injuries, slips, trips, and falls, as well as higher levies for businesses, and concerns raised by the families of those lost on the Pike River mine collapse of 2010 that the changes will result in more deaths. Said Van Velden of the report, "Yeah, but they're just workers, who cares if they're safe?" The Taxpayer Union this week released two polls, one a general poll and the other looking at which political parties farm owners and managers support. Their polling company, Curia, which is no longer part of political polling regulatory agencies, released the figures to widespread mainstream media coverage, with one producer stating, "Remember when Orson Welles read War of the Worlds and everyone thought it was real even though it was a piece of fiction? We like to think of Curia polling along the same veins." Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, seen here going to complain that his new airline doesn't serve little cookies like his old airline, is off on another international trip, visiting Europe and China with plans to meet China's Xi Jinping. Said a spokesperson for the Prime Minister's office, "These groups represent some of our biggest trading partners, so we know Kiwis will understand that in a cost of living crisis when cheese costs $20 a block, that we need to keep giving a wealthy and sorted former CEO free trips all over the world." The inter-island ferry Aratere was forced to stop mid-transit this week as an electrical fault caused unexpected issues with the propulsion drive while sailing. The ship itself is slated for retirement in August this year, just in time for the ferry replacements to arrive, give or take half a decade. Said Finance Minister Nicola No-Boats-Willis, seen here telling scary stories by torchlight about how she was forced to not buy her kids Ben and Jerry's at the movies. "I don't see a problem here. I mean, the ship was in the Cook Strait at the time, and I can't see it from my office, so I literally couldn't see the problem." Hastings District Council has removed videos on Māori wards after legal threats from that group your racist uncle keeps posting to on Facebook, Hobson's Pledge. In their complaint letter, the group pointed out that a 2004 legal case meant that councils could not promote a preferred stance on an issue which could influence voter decisions, and since the government is forcing councils to hold referenda on retaining Māori wards this year at huge expense, Hobson's Pledge felt it was best to support free speech on the topic by demanding the council stay quiet. Said a spokesperson for the group, "These videos are coming at the expense of ratepayers in the area, which is unfair. I mean, not as unfair as forcing ratepayers to foot the bill on the referendum that they didn't want or ask for, which will cost a lot more than a couple of cheaply made in-house video pieces. But we don't make the rules, only enforce them when Māori look to be getting onto any kind of even playing field with non-Māori." NBR this week released its most recent rich list, which showed that the wealth of individuals had increased almost exactly as much as the savings made by punishing poor people and beneficiaries. Said the Prime Minister, seen here realising that since the rich got richer, his party donations this year will be huge. "What I'm saying to you is, these are hard-working individuals that we should all be proud of. Well, hard enough working to know that they can make lots of profit in Chinese sweatshops, and proud of how they supported the US tariff policies, which has been detrimental to worldwide economies, including ours. But they're rich, so we don't say bad things about them, and if the paws don't learn a lesson or two from them, we may be forced to punch down even harder on them." More staffing cuts are being proposed at the Ministry of Culture and Heritage to pay for those landlord tax cuts and tobacco kickbacks. This time, historians and staff who create educational content used by both schools and the public is in the firing line. Said an expert from the organisation, "Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and those who choose to do what people can learn from history, well, you know what? Not our problem anymore, but there will be some epic musicals written about it in the future. Something about hearing the people sing?" And finally, Hamilton is once again playing host to the largest agricultural showcase in the Southern Hemisphere as the Field Days kick off at Mystery Creek. The event pumps over $200 million into the Waikato economy, and with changes to this year's budget, which allows farmers to buy equipment that the government pays for as part of its business boost plan, sales are expected to be booming. The arrival of the event also heralds some other knock-on effects to the region, including a number of schools having teacher-only days because David Seymour doesn't mind kids missing school if they're children of party donors, an increase in patronage to the city's strip clubs, brothels, gay sauna and fast food joints, and until this year, an increased visible presence of homelessness on the streets, as they were forced out of emergency housing and hotels for farmers to be accommodated. Said Associate Housing Minister and Hamilton West MP Tama Potaka, seen here showing what he means by lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. We got the balance right on homelessness this year by preemptively kicking people out of emergency housing before the event and then refusing to let them return this time round. And that is this week's The News. Thanks again for all the support this week, and we'll catch you next time. Hey, thanks for checking out this week's Omnibus edition. Really appreciate it. Like I said, it's short. I'm sorry. I've been busy. I can't help it. Real life gets in the way sometimes. But it's alright. These things happen. The doctor was actually really clear when I went to visit him this week that I need to calm the stress levels down a little bit. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. Anyway, if you haven't already, please feel free to hit the like button on the video or subscribe to the channel if you don't do so already. There's a whole bunch of content that's been planned already, planned and made and waiting to go out around local elections for the start of July when nominations open. So there'll be a lot of interesting stuff coming through there. So yeah, I guess that's me for the week. Live long, prosper, be one with the Force. I'll catch you guys all next time. Hey, thanks for checking out today's video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe so you get more updates as we go along. We deal with these guys for the rest of the year.